We have to give people room to grow. But how do we do that without actually impinging on the things that they need to do? My name is Turab. I make videos about emotional intelligence every day. If we don't figure out the answer to this question, chances are our organizations, our initiatives are going to fail, because experimentation is required in order for us to move forward as an organization. And really, experimentation is required for us to grow as leaders. So oftentimes, us as leaders, we look at the thing as kind of a third-party entity, and that we're not necessarily all that involved, that other people need to be doing things for us. But it requires a lot of consistent making sure that they are hitting the marks that we expect of them, and making sure that we are delivering the correct amount of structuring, the training that's required for those people to get to the results that we require of them. One of the main things that I've figured out through all of this experimentation over the last year of my life as being a practice owner of a dental practice, of being a board of director member in a soon-to-be national nonprofit, in being a partner in a media company, in being the CEO of Turabify, I realized that I need to give people the liberty of going about a task on their own and then coming back, reassessing whether or not I gave them an accurate time frame, or if I gave them accurate enough directions, but also whether or not they understood the concept by virtue of going through the exercise of actually making it a reality. So I'll give you an example. My outreach coordinator, Jen, who is going to be the president of Bright Smiles Community Outreach Coalition, the national nonprofit, I gave her the task of creating key performance indicators and metrics for the organization itself. Now, being someone that has only recently been introduced to key performance indicators and metrics, part of the reason that I did this was an experiment to see how it is that my outreach coordinator is thinking about things, and also how I'm going to use that thought process to transform it into what key performance indicators really need to be, which are just raw numbers that indicate whether or not someone is doing the job that is expected of them. So she wrote up this whole document on KPIs and metrics, and lo and behold, it wasn't all that accurate. A lot of it had qualitative information, but it didn't have the nuance required to actually have numbers that indicate whether or not we're getting to the results that we're getting to. So I went through, after looking through our whole thought process, and as a leader, I basically wrote out the key performance indicators and metrics that are required to get to those indicators after the fact. Now, was that a good experiment? I think so, because I got Jen, my outreach coordinator, start thinking about things a little bit more structured and systematically, but also it got me to understand what it is that someone in her position that hasn't necessarily put these things together might be lacking in order to get to the correct conclusions, to actually get that result that I'm looking for, a sheet basically composed of accurate key performance indicators and metrics. Now, the other thing is I'm doing some experimentation with the leaders in the Turabify Network, which is my internship program that is going to be the pipeline for having useful people come into the organizations, the systems that I'm making in Ohio in the years to come. The greatest of the leaders out of that organization are expected to take on some pretty substantial tasks on their own. Namely, in 2025, I expect the business and networking interns to be creating meaningful networking events in their university. Now, there's a lot of details that go into meaningful events, particularly the flow of an event, how organized and structured it is, whether or not that event is being captured on cameras or via video, whether or not the actual attendees are paying for the event, and how that's being collected and where that's being put, among 1,000 other things. So I could, as a leader, step in there and say, hey, this is how I do things. Or I can give them the task, the informed leader, the inspirational leader, the tasks of putting all that stuff together me coming and taking a look at it kind of in the middle of the process to make sure things aren't missed, and use that entire experience as learning, as education for how to actually think about doing this thing, and then furthermore executing on it, getting the people in the right place in the right time, and making sure that in the end the leader, the one responsible for putting this thing together, feels that it accomplished the thing that they're trying to do, namely give people a really valuable experience and allow people to exchange contact information and ideally get opportunities for jobs and things in the long run, or even events or trips to certain places they're looking for. So these experiments are really hard, I think, for a lot of business owners and leaders to put together, because they simply oftentimes lack the trust in their people to give them the liberty of going through and doing something on their own. Furthermore, that trust often comes from a lack of resources to begin with, a lack of buffering to begin with in terms of financials. So if we give people the luxury of time to hammer through their tasks, then we necessarily probably have to pay them in that process. We necessarily have to assume that they're spending that time accurately. Trust is an essential part of building a sustainable organization, as stated from billionaires, multimillionaires, people that are actually putting these things together. How we build trust is by giving tasks that are a bit complicated, complex tasks, allowing people to parse through them, and making sure that we give adequate feedback as leaders in a timely manner. Now, it's harder said than done, as are all things that build us up as human beings, but it is worth doing consistently, because we never know when our system is going to break by virtue of not training people properly, by virtue of not giving them the ability to go out and do things on their own. The idea of a leader, as stated by Mr. Brandon Dawson, is to make everyone else's life easier. I think something that he stole basically from John Maxwell, one of the leading coaches of leadership in the world. How do we make other people's lives easier? Well, we have to make them in some ways harder first, because we learn the most through experimentation. Furthermore, most of the time, me included, I don't necessarily know exactly what I'm doing all the time. So experimenting and actually giving those tasks to people informs me on perhaps maybe I should have put more details in, or maybe I should have included some specific definitions of things. Maybe I should have given an example template of what this type of thing looks like, so that the person that I put in charge of that task has a better idea of how to do a good job, making it easier for them. The hard thing is we can't really make things easier for people unless we've done them ourselves, because that's really the key. Is personal experience is required in order to make that task as concise as it can be. And the more that we do that task, and the more personal experience that we get doing that task, the better we are communicating exactly what we're looking for. So in the beginning, I just suggest posing the experiments, putting yourself in uncomfortable scenarios, and making sure to follow through and look at all the results that you ideally wanted from that task being accomplished, and seeing if we can do it better next time. The entire process is one of learning, my friend. The entire process of delegating and making things scalable, optimizing things, is a massive experiment on its own. And it's something that I do literally daily with my leaders. I say, hey, this is a task I want to get done. This is the time frame that I wanted to get it done in. And if they don't execute on that, then I know that perhaps either they are lacking in their leadership acumen, their execution acumen, or I am lacking in my leadership and execution acumen. Either way, if we find a lack, at least we have a goal. And with a goal, we can make sure that we're moving forward and actually building what it means to be, I suppose, the best version of ourselves as leaders. So this advice applies to literally anyone that is starting any organization or is in the midst of optimizing an organization. You need to establish a sense of trust in your environment. And if that person that you've delegated to, you do feel like you gave them ample data, ample evidence, ample specification for how to accomplish the task, and they still cannot accomplish the task, then it's probably time to move on and look for someone that is a little bit more capable. Look for someone that has a little bit more intellect when it comes to that thing. And that in itself is a whole different game, trying to figure out whether or not the right people are in the right positions. That requires a tremendous amount of reserve, mental reserve, but also logic when it comes to what we're actually trying to accomplish with our organization. Hopefully this message finds you well. Hopefully you get something out of it today. And if you do, please let me know what it is. Let me know if there's other questions that you have. I may have the answers. I may not have the answers. I am learning this stuff as I go as well. But hopefully it shows you that there is a certain type of thought process that's required in order to actually get to those goals that we're ideally looking for in life. Actualize your potential catalyst. This world needs you. Take care of yourself.